Dear friends, I am here to speak on this very auspicious day, the 75th anniversary of our Independence Day. While I feel very pain to see that an effort is going on to turn a maximum of population towards their moral slavery. I do feel that every person as an individual must have that certain rationalism, sense of reasoning to say no where there is required. But when we are losing our that certain feature as human being to say no, that means we are moving towards that certain moral slavery. We know that whenever you are scratching any wound, that wound generally bleeds. Similarly, by displaying the thing that happened in 1947, same things if these are displayed, the youngsters of this present day, they will not just judge the historical background of the situation or the situation of that certain age, but they will just get provocated. They will be transformed from a very normal and peaceful human being to a very arrogant and very revengeful youngsters. I raise a question here, my dear. If you open up your mind, you should understand, and you should also raise the question similarly, that what is the use of scratching the wounds that have been healed up in last 75 years? If we are not committed to save the nation, we are not committed to save the culture heritage, and that certain moral background of a nation, then this nation will be fragmented. Surely and certainly there will be a lot of bleeding. As wounded and scratched wounds generally bleeds, similarly the displaying of the unwanted happenings that happened in those days of direct actions in our country after 1945 till 47, then what is the use of showing all these things to the youngsters? What is the use of just recollecting the past in this certain way where the result is always a resultant value is zero, because it will not create any sort of fraternity, it will not create any sort of love, it will create hostility, it will create revenge, and with that certain revengeful attitude, the youngsters will never be able to pacify their mind. They won't be able to engage themselves in getting involved in any sort of constructive activities. Then I am very sorry to say that a lot of our people are not using their mind power. They are turning them towards that certain moral slavery. Then as a human being, if you turn to be the slaves towards hatred, slaves under communal dismissed feelings, slaves of revenge, slaves of contempt and so on, then what will be their outcomes? We all need to think of this. In our country, there are many atrocious rulers in the olden days. Kangs, you have heard the name? Kangs was the most atrocious ruler who carried on his that atrocity and that certain absolutism by projecting him as the god, and ultimately he was just demolished to the ground by his own nephew. Then similarly in all ages, the similar Christian will just incur, they will have their incarnation in this earth. Then those people are believing that by misusing the sentiments of the youngsters and the people, those who are not that much mentally uplifted, they are not having that much progressive mind, they are guided by their temporary emotion of revenge, anger, and so on. They will just make their right to rule the country perpetually. This is a very wrong notion. We need to just make people understand that they are not born to submit under the will of any group or any certain ism. Every human being must have the certain independent feeling or personal choices and personal thoughts and sense of reasoning. That is the identity of a human being. Then if you are not using your mind, if you are getting guided by the people, those who are crooked ones, those who are trying to make you think in their direction, then you are turning to be the slaves. You know that in the medieval age, the slavery was perpetual, and in those days the slaves were compelled to do the work, and they were compelled to think, they were compelled to act according to the choice of their masters. Even at present, if you lose their identity to think independently, if you lose our sense of reasoning, if we lose our rationalism, then we will lose our right to be identified as human being. Friends, I just urge you therefore that raise your that type of mental ability, grow your that certain mental strength so that you can judge things, you can understand things, and you can rise above the level of the commoners with your that certain excellence of mind as well as sense of all good reasoning, so that whenever anything wrong will go on, then you'll raise your voice with no. You might have heard that Joseph Mazzini is only a singular person. He alone raised the voice against the fragmentation of Italy. It was a fragmented country, but he only raised his voice for the first time that this country should be united. And that's why he is still honored as the father of the unification of Italy. But here in our country, the country is being fragmented morally. A lot of people, they don't believe to tolerate others. They observe the counterparts, their neighbors with the different identity, with the religious background as their enemies, as their opponents. And if this thing is carried on with a concerted effort, then it is not far from us when the country will also be fragmented. Instead of unification, our country will be just fragmented. And this country, which has a very large glory, which has a very good heritage, which has a very fine background of living together for a long time with a common mixed culture, that country will be found fragmented just in the name of religion, caste, creed, and even in their so-called social status. Then if it carried on, then there will be no strong nation in near future. The nation will be weakened day by day, and people will be engaged in just fighting against one another. And naturally, those will be engaged in fighting and just taking revenge against their brethren, then they won't be able to get involved in any sort of progressive activities. Then country will lose its progress. And if it is carried on, then surely its outcome will be very catastrophic. We all need to think all this. Those who are having the rational mind, I would like to ask them, please think all this in a different way, not according to the way of the choices of the leaders, so-called leaders, those who are trying to perpetuate their own right to rule the country according to their own choice. Rulers don't have any choices for their subjects. Rulers believe in occupying power by hook or crook by any means. Naturally, such rulers should not be blindfoldedly supported. If you are blindfolded, if you support your so-called leaders without using your sense of reasoning, naturally, you won't be able to find out what is wrong, what is right, and you will be turned as a slave in due course. I would urge all just give up this habit of following anyone or any certain ism, certain any thought, or certain any political so-called ideology blindly. Rather, a human being, since you are supposed to live for a certain limited period, in this meantime you try your best to assert your identity as true reasonable human beings, not as a blindfolded human beings. I ask that on this very day, our 75th anniversary day of our independence, all should think differently and get our country free from this moral bankruptcy as well as slavery of this so-called false ism. And if you are not concerned at present, in due course, your children, your next generation will be the sufferer, and you will be not there to protect them from this type of disastrous consequences. I urge you all, those who are following my words, if you are understanding a little bit of that, support it and just give your like and share it to others, so that whatever the thoughts I try to breed in you may go to others, and they may also think differently and may assert their identity as human beings. Thank you all. Have a nice time. Enjoy this 75th anniversary of our country's independence. Jai Hind.